If you're looking for an affordable way to lower the stance of your 1994 to 2004 Mustang while also improving its handling, look no further than this 24-way adjustable coilover kit. This setup offers tons of adjustability with a pretty significant drop in overall height, plus improved handling to boot. And it does it all for about the best price in the segment. So if you want a feature-packed coilover kit that doesn't require you to spend a ton of money, then this setup is going to be for you. Value for money is really the name of the game here. You would be hard-pressed to find another coilover kit on the market that has the same kind of feature set for a better price. Now, starting out with the thing you all want to know though, with this kit installed, you'll be able to lower your car between 1 and 3 inches both front and rear, so it's going to make for a nice low stance even if you've got these adjusted all the way up. And you can dial in exactly how much drop you want, as the height is adjustable both front and rear. Now, as far as performance is concerned, you get monotube shocks both front and rear with 24-way adjustable damping, so you can really fine-tune how these ride and handle. If you're hitting the track, you can just grab the top right here, dial them up for more performance, and if you're taking a long road trip, you can dial them back for a softer ride. And that's something you don't typically see at this price point. Now, of course, you get new springs as well, and these are uprated versus your stock ones too, plus they're a little bit shorter to accommodate for the drop in height and also help improve handling and work better with these adjustable shocks. Now, stiffer springs and stiffer shocks plus a lower overall center of gravity means less body roll and less weight transfer, so this kit is going to provide a pretty good improvement in the corners especially. The springs both front and rear have a higher spring rate versus stock too, so combined with the shocks and that lowered ride height, this is going to make for a stiffer ride versus your original suspension setup. But with the adjustable damping here, you do have the ability to soften things up so it's not as punishing day to day. Now, something else you don't typically see at this price point is the inclusion of adjustable camber plates with pillow ball mounts up here, and those are going to give you better performance plus allow you to correct negative camber that comes with lowering a car. So these are going to help correct suspension geometry, make your alignments easier, and give you the flexibility to dial in the way your car handles a bit more as well. And it's a really nice feature to see included at this price point. Now, construction here is pretty solid as well. The shocks feature a red powder coat down here on the bottom. Everything else here is anodized red as well to match. So it's going to be pretty durable and nice to look at as well. You also, of course, get new spring perches both front and rear, and the adjuster tools for the collars and perches come included in the kit. Now, these don't have all the flash of some of the more expensive coilovers, but I don't think any of you will really be disappointed considering the price. Speaking of which, I know I've alluded to it multiple times throughout this video, but this kit is going to run you about $600 for the whole setup. And that makes this pretty much the most affordable coilover kit on the market for these SN95s. And while again, this may not be the flashiest or have all of the features, it's still got pretty much everything you want, and it's going to give your car a cool stance, it'll improve the handling, and grant you a ton of adjustability. So if you're in the market and you're working on a budget, this is something that's going to be a great choice for you. Installation gets a soft 3 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and you can anticipate it taking you about 4 hours to do, perhaps a little more, depending on the condition of your car and your familiarity with the Mustang suspension. Don't let that 3 out of 3 scare you though, it's just because there's a lot to do and you've got to do some fine tuning once everything is put into place. Everything here is designed to bolt into place without the need for permanent modifications to the car itself, so you can easily set it back to stock later on if the need arises. But again, you are just going to have to spend a little bit of time dialing things in and getting the ride height where you want it. And once you're done, make sure you take your car for a professional alignment to get everything buttoned up exactly the way you need it to be. With that said though, let's head on out to the shop and we will walk you through the installation process step by step.
All right, for this install, you're gonna need a 1/2 inch impact, various 3/8 impact, a tape measure, 24 and 18 mil wrench, a 3/8 driver, vice grips, 1/4 inch ratchet, a E8 inverted Torx, various extensions, a 13, 15, 17, 18, a 21, and a 24 mil socket set. Also a swivel head 15 mil socket and various swivel sockets. Also the supplied collar tightening tools and a caliper hanger. And not shown on screen, you will need a floor jack and a set of jack stands. Today we're going to be installing front and rear coilovers on our Mustang, but first we're going to watch a quick uninstall video of the front and rear suspension. Just note for the front, they do remove the front sway bar, but for us we're just going to need to remove the end link.
Alright, so moving on to the front, you can see that I have both of my wheels and tires off. I've already disconnected the sway bar end link on the driver's side, so I'm going to do the same on the passenger side here. It's a 15 millimeter nut. So let's get this nut off and this bushing as well. If that doesn't come off, it's fine. You can usually hit it up, hit the sway bar up, and both those bushings will pop. All right, so now we're gonna remove our sway bar end links. Again, I have that 15 mil deep socket on my air ratchet, and then I have a 10 millimeter wrench on the shaft of the end link, just to keep it from spinning. Let's start this nut. And pull that end link out of here. Remove that on both sides. All right, now we're going to remove our sway bar. You can see this is our mounting point with our bushing in there. These are 16 millimeter nuts. There are 2 on each side. And this plastic piece right here, we're actually gonna snake it through. So I'm going to buzz these off. Hoping that plastic is going to keep it up while I remove the other side. All right, now I'm going to snake this out of here. So there are some push pins that we can remove on the inside of here. Let me get my tool real quick. This inner fender. So there's that push pin. It's a Christmas tree type clip. We are going to slide our sway bar out of the way. All right, so what we're gonna do now is remove our caliper and rotor. First, starting with our caliper, we're gonna take the whole unit off. So we're after these 2 15 millimeter bolts on the back side. Let's get a breaker bar on here first. Make sure that we can loosen them up. All right, and let me get my air ratchet in here. And just to get ready, I have my caliper hanger right there. I'll keep that where my body bolt is. Where's this guy? All right, and then we're gonna hang this caliper out of the way. All right, so next up we're gonna remove our rotor. If you haven't replaced your brakes or removed your rotor yet, you may still have these factory locking washers. R99 only has about 40,000 miles on it, so these are the original brakes. And we're going to remove these little metal washers, like the lock tabs that hold your rotor onto the hub itself. So you don't need to replace these or put them back on. I'll show you a trick when I reinstall the wheel, how to get your rotor to stay in place. But I just bend it so it's a misshape and then just spin it off. And now we can pull our rotor off. All right, so what we're gonna do next is remove our wheel speed sensor or our ABS sensor right here. And we need an E8 E-bit. So it's like an inverted Torx. And I have this on my 1/4 inch drive, so I'm just going to loosen this up and remove it. Because we gotta separate our spindle from our strut here in a second. We don't want to cause any unnecessary stress on this wheel speed sensor because they aren't cheap. All right, so that's out. All right, so let's remove that wheel speed sensor. I'm just gonna push it in the front and pull it in the back as well at the same time. This has not been removed since new. There's a lot of road grime on that. All right, so that's out. Then I'm gonna take my push pin removal tool and get this loom out of the way. And then lift up on these. And just get that out of the way. Again, this is a magnet, so you can just stick it to a body part and it'll be out of the way. All right, so our next step is to remove this 124mm nut holding this little brake line bracket in place. So just spin this off. We are going to attach that again later. And then we're going to lower the vehicle down to the ground so we can get a jack onto the lower control arm. And then we're going to remove the two nut and bolts holding our strut assembly to our spindle. And what that will do is release the tension on that pocket spring so we can lower the jack, get that spring out, and get our strut up all at the same time. All right, so as you can see, I have a jack directly under my lower control arm. The vehicle is pretty low to the ground, and what I'm going to do is now jack up on my jack and take up some of that tension on my pocket spring. Now I can remove the nut and bolt on my lower strut assembly. I'm gonna need a 21mm socket for my bolt head on this side, and then a 24mm socket for my nut side. Let's go ahead and get our tools in place here. All right, there's the first nut. And let's get the second one out of here. Second nut, I'm going to try to pull one of these bolts out. All right, there's one, there's two. Then I'm going to let my spindle just hang out here. And you see my strut is free now. Now I can lower my jack slowly and have this pocket spring come out. But first I'm going to remove my strut so I have some more room to play with. All right, now we're going to remove our strut. We'll start off by removing these nuts. These are 15mm. Now I'm going to hold on to my strut, take out this last bolt. You grab that and remove your strut.
All right, now that we have our strut assembly out, we are going to move on to our top hat section. We're going to remove these two bolts with our 15mm socket. And then move on to our last one. You want to put a hand underneath here and catch it when it comes down. You set this off to the side. Then you're going to repeat the same steps for the other side. All right, now that we have our stock strut assembly out, this is our stock strut compared to our coilover that we will be installing. This is an uncompressed length. I got this close as match as possible to the stock ride height, but we are actually going to be turning this down and lowering it to our closest fitment as possible for our specific vehicle. So we're just going to turn it upside down. You can do it whichever direction you need to. And I'm going to turn the coil or the tower, the mounting brackets down, spin that all the way down. And then we're going to double check our measurements. Measure between here, it's about 3 inches compared to our passenger side or other side. We're at 2.5. So we can go a little bit lower just to make sure they're nice and even. You can make adjustments on the vehicle as you need, as you see fit, according to your setup. All right, and once we have that set to our desired length, we can go ahead, set our hooks in there, and just snug everything up. And again, once this is installed, we can match everything, make some more adjustments, make some more measurements, and tighten everything back down. All right, one thing I do want to point out is that there is a left and right variation. It is marked, indicated next to the logo. And once you have the correct orientation, you can slide this into your strut tower, line up your bolts, and reach up and just get one nut started on there just to hold yourself in place. All right, now that we have one bolt attached, we can reach under, lift up our coil, and get the other bolt started. And then we can tighten this down with our 15mm socket. All right, you can do this evenly to make sure everything sits flush, and then you're going to come back and retorque everything down to factory spec. All right, now we're going to move on to the install of our knuckle into our coilover. One thing to keep note, when we are raising the lower control arm back into its position, we're going to want to make sure and line up our end link into its bracket. All right, once you have that situated, you can raise the whole entire thing up into the knuckle. All right, now that I have fully compressed my spring all the way that I can go, I realize that this is just a little bit too short, so we're gonna actually lengthen this with our collars and our tools that we've provided. Loosen this up and unscrew this just enough where we can get it matched up close to our knuckle where we can get our bolts in. We're gonna get our lower strut bolt in. We're gonna be using the factory ones. All right, once we have those two in, we can now unscrew our collar all the way back down and use our collar tool and lock it down. And again, we can come back and make any adjustments that we need to. All right, now that we have our top and bottom bolts in, we can install our 24mm nut, top and bottom. And for this, we're going to use a 24mm wrench on the nut end and a 21mm socket with a swivel on the bolt head. All right, once again, we're going to torque this down after we get everything secured. All right, now we're going to install our rotor. Slide that on and slide on our caliper. Once we got the bottom one threaded in, start the top. All right, once we have our bolts in, we can come in, tighten this down with our 15mm swivel socket and a 3-inch extension. And once you have those tightened down, you're gonna wanna come back and retorque everything down to factory spec. Now we can move on to our sway bar end link, install our bushing and our nut. Tighten this down with our 15mm socket. And you can put a vice grips on the top here to keep everything from spinning. But once again, come back and torque everything down to spec. All right, now we can move on to our wheel speed sensor, place it back into its position. And we can tighten this down with our E8 inverted Torx. We can move on to our bracket for the wheel speed sensor and tighten down with our 24mm socket. All right, once you have everything tightened down for the front coilovers on the driver's side, you can repeat the entire process for the passenger side and make sure and torque everything down.
All right, so we're gonna start off in the back and we need access to our trunk. And we're gonna remove a few trim pieces in here, the sides, to get access to the top of our shock. But right here on this trim piece, there are 4 push pins. I have a push pin removal tool. If you don't have one, you can use a flathead screwdriver. So let's remove all 4 of these. Again, they're push pins like a Christmas tree type. There's 2 on each side of that hinge plate. Just lift that piece out of the way. And then on the back side of your trunk, you're gonna see 2 plastic screws. You can use a flathead. There is a little slot right there for it. We're just gonna spin it off with our finger. And these are just like a plastic nut type deal. Just like that. All right, now with those 2 nuts and 4 push pins removed, we are going to get this panel out of the way, set it off to the side. So we're also going to remove the 2 side panels that cover our shock towers in the rear. These will just slide out of the way, just off to the side there. And that will expose the nut for the top of our shock. Do that on both sides. All right, so I have my air ratchet right here. It's a 3/8 drive with a deep 15mm socket. We are going to loosen up and remove the nuts on top of our shock. Do that on both sides. And now when we lift the vehicle in the air, those shocks will drop out. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and get our wheels and tires off. All right, so one of our first steps in the uninstall process is to get this quad shock out of the way. So if you have a GT or a convertible version, you will have this quad shock here. I have an 18mm socket. I'm just gonna remove that nut and take the quad shock off of that stud. Just pull it like that and let it sit. Do that on both sides. All right, so since we had to remove the nut on the top of our shock, what we're after now is the bolt here. It's a 15mm head and an 18mm nut on the back side. So I'm just gonna pull the bolt and then get the shock out of the way. Do that on both sides as well. All right, so now we're going to remove our rear sway bar. First, we're gonna get this wheel speed sensor out of the way and off of this bracket here. And then we're going to use a 14mm socket to remove the 2 bolts on this side and the 2 bolts on the other. And then the sway bar will just slide out of the way. So as you see on this bolt right here, you're gonna have a parking brake bracket. You're just gonna slide that out of the way. We'll reattach that when we put our new sway bar in. Now I'm gonna get the last 2 bolts out and slide the sway bar out of the way. All right, so you can see that I have 2 pole jacks supporting the entire weight of my rear end. I'm going to get the last bolt that holds in my sway bar out of the way. And you can see these handles are facing straight back, so hopefully the sway bar will land on there. There is a little bit of weight, so if you have a friend to help you out, I highly recommend you grab them. But I'm gonna give one hand to the bar and one hand to my impact and get this bolt out of here. There's that side. And I'm gonna pull this bolt. And there is our factory sway bar out of the way. So minus your upper and lower control arms, those are the only things that are attaching your rear axle to the body of the Mustang. So now I'm going to lower my jack stands evenly, both at the same time. And then I'm going to lower one side a little lower than the other so I can angle it and get that spring out of there. So as you can see, there's no tension on that, but there is on this. And if I pull on this side of the axle, I can get that spring out. So I'm gonna lower it down even more to get some more travel out of it. Just like that. And now I can get my spring out of there.
All right, now that we have our rear shock absorber assembly out, this is our old shock absorber with our old spring from the axle. This is gonna be our new assembly. We have our new perch that sits right on top of the spring. Get that off of there. Once it's out, there's a rubber bushing that sits on top. Press that back in. And we have height adjustments on our shock absorber assembly. We can loosen this collar, spin this down as much as we need to, and tighten it back up and adjust our height. And also the same thing for our spring perch. Once we remove this, we can spin that down, place this back on, and lock it down with our supplied hardware. Now once we have this adjusted closely to match both rear sides, we can then install it and then get it situated and sit at the right height level. All right, now that we have everything disassembled, we can take our new coil spring, transfer over our rubber bushing, and we'll place the top end in first. Get that situated on the mount. And then we can bring up our pole stand just to catch it, just to hold it a little bit. All right, one thing I do want to note, once you have the bottom perch set in, it's going to lock into that spot right there, and then you can fully adjust your poles to rise all the way up. And then you're going to repeat the same steps for the other side. All right, now that we have both springs installed, we're going to evenly lift our axle so we can get both of the perches lined up and in place. All right, once we have them pretty much lined up, we can now attach our sway bar. All right, now we can take our sway bar and install one bolt into our front end. Just gonna put in a couple threads and we're gonna move over to the other side. All right, once we have one side on the other end, we can lift it up and raise our rear bolt into position. All right, now we can tighten this down with our 13 mil socket. All right, we're gonna wanna come back and torque everything down and repeat the same process for the other side. All right, first thing we wanna do is make sure our bushings are placed in the correct positioning and install into our shock mount. We can take our factory hardware, slide in our bolt, and hold that in place. All right, now that we have our bolt in place, we can attach our nut, tighten everything down, use our 18 mil wrench and our 15 mil socket. All right, once that's tightened down, we want to go back and retorque everything down spec. And also, if you need to make any adjustments, you can tighten down your collar and lock that down, and also repeat the same steps for the other side. All right, once you got that tightened down, if you need to make any adjustments, you can tighten your collar, lock that down to provide a tool, and tighten your collar down over there. Then you can repeat the same adjustments that you have to on the other side. All right, for our rear spring, there's not too much tension on this because we have it unloaded off of the vehicle right now. But once there's some pressure, you can then make some adjustments and get a little bit more tightness on there. You just want to snug up your collar, make any adjustments as necessary, and then use your provided hardware and tighten down your collar. All right, once you got that tightened down and adjusted to where you need to, you can repeat the same steps for the other side. Before we install our top shock bolts, we're gonna install our rear shock. Back onto the stud, attach our bolt, and tighten this down with the 18 mil socket. And you can come back and retorque everything down spec. All right, now that we have everything tightened and installed, we can remove our pull jacks out of the way and let all the weight sit on our shocks. All right, now that we have our shock through our strut mount, we're gonna place our hardware on top. Get that down into the hole there where the rubber bushing sits. And then we're gonna take our nut, slide it on top, thread that in a bit, and we're gonna use a 17 millimeter deep socket on our top mount. One thing I did wanna note is that I did use a floor jack to support the rear differential to bring up the shock absorbers a bit, so that way I can get some more clearance. And also after we tighten this down, we're gonna wanna repeat and torque everything down on the same side. One thing I did wanna note is that I did use a floor jack to support the rear diff, to support the bottom end and bring up the shock absorbers through the strut mount. And also after we're done tightening everything down, we're gonna torque everything down to specs and then repeat for the other side. All right, once we have everything tightened, we're gonna reinstall our carpet pieces, trunk panels, install our other section, slide that over. And you may have some fasteners and plastic clips to hold down your panels, but since ours has been apart so many times, we do not have any at this moment. All right, that wraps up our install for front and rear coilover kit with 24-way damper adjustment in red color on 94 to 04 Mustang. Just remember, for everything Mustang related, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.